The bullet shattered the window behind Thaddeus Blackwood. Glass rained down on his shoulders as he spun his wheelchair around, heart hammering against his ribs. Another shot cracked through the air, splintering the doorframe inches from his head. "Sir, down!" his security guard shouted, diving across the office to reach him. Too late. The third shot came from a different angle. The guard crumpled to the floor, blood spreading across his white shirt. In the sudden silence that followed, Thaddeus could hear only his own ragged breathing and the distant wail of sirens. This was the third attempt on his life in 2 months. Someone wanted the last Blackwood heir dead, and they were getting closer each time. Get ready. You think you know where this story is going, but trust me, you don't. Let us know where you're listening from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. 3 days later, Thaddeus sat on the veranda of his coastal manor, watching seagulls circle against a steel-gray sky. At 36, he had everything money could buy: a shipping empire, a magnificent cliffside home overlooking the Atlantic, art collections worth millions, yet he felt more trapped than ever. Not just by the wheelchair that had been his constant companion since a car crash 5 years ago, but by the isolation his wealth and now these attacks had created. "Mr. Blackwood?" His assistant, Meredith, approached cautiously. After the latest incident, everyone around him walked on eggshells. "The police called. They still have no leads on who's targeting you." Thaddeus nodded, unsurprised. "And my security?" "Doubled. Detective Taylor suggests you minimize public appearances until they catch the shooter." "So I'm a prisoner now?" He gestured to his wheelchair. "More than I already was." Meredith's expression softened. "Your mother called again, about her birthday next month. Eudora Blackwood's 80th birthday. Despite their complicated relationship, she'd never forgiven him for taking the company in directions his father wouldn't have approved of. Thaddeus couldn't ignore this milestone. He pulled a pocket watch from his vest and clicked it open, revealing not the time, but a faded photograph tucked inside the lid. A young woman in an elegant dress, laughing at someone off-camera. "I want to give her something meaningful this year," he said, more to himself than to Meredith. "A recreation of this dress. It's what she wore the night she met my father. She lost the original in a move years ago." Meredith studied the photo. "That's very thoughtful, sir. But with only 4 weeks left and such a vague reference, money's no object. Find someone who can do it." But money, Thaddeus discovered over the next week, wasn't always enough. 7 high-end designers rejected the project outright. Too little time. Too little reference material. Too much risk to their reputations if the result disappointed. "There is one more option," Meredith said hesitantly after delivering the latest refusal. "Not a famous designer, but I've heard remarkable things about her work. She runs a small shop in the Old Quarter called Yarrow and Thread." The Old Quarter. Narrow streets, crowded sidewalks. A nightmare for wheelchairs. And security. "Not worth the risk," Thaddeus said dismissively. That night, alone in his study, Thaddeus found himself staring at the photograph again. His mother's young face looked back at him with more joy than he'd ever seen in person. What had happened to that happy young woman? When had she become the cold, disapproving figure he knew? Perhaps the answer lay partly with him. The next morning, against all security advice, Thaddeus ordered his driver to take him to the Old Quarter. "You can't come in," the young woman said bluntly, blocking the doorway to her shop. "The entrance isn't wheelchair accessible." Thaddeus Blackwood, used to people falling over themselves to accommodate him, blinked in surprise. "I'm aware of that. My driver can help me." "And damage the antique threshold that's survived since 1892? No, thank you." She stepped outside instead, closing the door behind her. She was younger than he expected, probably late 20s, with dark curly hair pulled back in a messy knot. Her hands were visibly calloused, her simple dress speckled with threads. "I'm Anouk Zephyrin. You're the man who's been terrorizing designers across the city with impossible deadlines." His security team, waiting by the car, tensed at her tone. Thaddeus waved them back. Thaddeus Blackwood, and I wasn't aware that paying top dollar for a service was considered terrorizing. It is when you demand miracles without proper reference material. Despite her words, Anouk's eyes, a startling shade of green that reminded him of sea glass, held more curiosity than judgment. Unlike others who either pitied his disability or pandered to his wealth, she looked directly at him. I have reference material. He pulled out his pocket watch and handed her the photograph. Anouk studied it carefully, her expression softening. Your mother? Yes. It's her 80th birthday next month. She wore this the night she met my father. The dress is 1960s, silk chiffon overlay, with hand-beaded detailing on the bodice. Her fingers traced the photo's edge. The structure is classic Dior-inspired, but the beadwork has a custom pattern. Who was the original designer? I don't know. That's all I have. Anouk handed back the photo, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through Thaddeus, a spark of something he hadn't felt in years. I can do it, she said simply. Just like that? Everyone else said 4 weeks was impossible. I didn't say it would be easy. I'll need exact measurements and weekly fittings with a model of similar proportions to ensure the dress drapes correctly. I can arrange a model, and you'll need to attend the fittings personally. Thaddeus frowned. Why? Because you're the only one who knows if the dress captures what you remember. This isn't just about measurements. It's about recreating a feeling. He studied her, trying to decide if this was some ploy to secure multiple appointments with a wealthy client. But her expression remained matter-of-fact, her eyes clear and direct. The entrance issue? He asked. There's a side door into the workroom. It's not fancy, but it's flat. I use it for deliveries. She named her price, reasonable, much less than the designers who'd turned him down, and extended her hand. Do we have a deal, Mr. Blackwood? As Thaddeus shook her hand, he realized he was actually looking forward to returning. The feeling both intrigued and terrified him. The first fitting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. On Monday night, Thaddeus received a call from Detective Taylor. We've identified the shooter, Mr. Blackwood. Martin Voss, a former employee of your shipping line. Voss? He was fired 3 years ago for theft. Yes, and apparently held a grudge. The good news is we have him in custody. You're certain he's the one? Ballistics match. And he had quite a collection of photos of you, tracking your movements. You're safe now. But as Thaddeus hung up, a nagging doubt remained. Voss was a petty thief, not an assassin, and those shots had been too precise, too professional. Had Voss been working for someone else? The next morning, Thaddeus arrived at Yarrow and Thread to find the side entrance propped open. Inside, Anouk's workroom was a marvel of organized chaos. Bolts of fabric arranged by color, spools of thread filling an entire wall, dress forms draped with works in progress. You came, she said, looking up from her sewing machine with genuine surprise. Did you think I wouldn't? Rich men make promises all the time. They rarely keep them when inconvenience is involved. She gestured to a woman standing by the window, an older model in her 70s with silver hair and elegant posture. This is Helen. She's agreed to be our fitting model. As Helen tried on the muslin mock-up Anouk had already prepared, Thaddeus found himself opening up about his mother, her strictness, her disappointment in his choices, but also her resilience after his father's death. Anouk listened while she worked, pins held between her lips, occasionally asking questions that somehow cut straight to the heart of his complicated feelings. Sounds like you're making this dress as much for yourself as for her, she observed, helping Helen remove the muslin. What do you mean? You're trying to reconnect her to a happier time, maybe hoping some of that happiness will spill over into your relationship now. The insight caught him off guard. You're very perceptive for a seamstress, and you're very dismissive for a man who needs my help. She met his gaze steadily. Everyone has a story, Mr. Blackwood, even those of us who work with our hands. After the fitting, as his driver helped him back into the car, Thaddeus realized he'd spent 2 hours in that small workshop without once checking his phone or thinking about the company. For those hours, he'd just been a man, having a conversation with a fascinating woman. Not a Blackwood heir, not a target, not a man defined by his wheelchair. As the car pulled away, he saw Anouk watching from the doorway. She raised her hand in a small wave, and he found himself waving back. He didn't notice the figure across the street, taking photographs, or the same figure that followed his car back to the highway before breaking off. Thaddeus Blackwood had just found a rare moment of peace. But the danger was far from over. The second fitting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. All week, Thaddeus found himself thinking about Anouk's workshop, the peaceful rhythm of her sewing machine, the rainbow of threads on the wall, and most of all, her direct gaze that saw past his wealth and wheelchair. "You're in a good mood today, sir," Meredith noted as she brought him the morning reports. "Am I?" Thaddeus signed the last document and handed it back. "Any updates from Detective Taylor?" "Martin Voss is still in custody. No new threats detected." She hesitated. "There is one other matter. Your cousin Gresham called 3 times yesterday while you were in meetings." Thaddeus frowned. As the second-largest shareholder in Blackwood Shipping and the company's chief financial officer, Gresham Blackwood had always coveted the CEO position that Thaddeus inherited. Their relationship had grown increasingly strained over the past year. What did he want? "He says there's an urgent financial matter requiring your immediate attention. Something about irregularities in the Southeast Asia shipping routes. Tell him I'll review it tomorrow. I have an appointment this afternoon." Meredith raised an eyebrow but said nothing. It wasn't like Thaddeus to postpone company business for a personal matter. But lately, nothing about her boss seemed quite like the Thaddeus Blackwood she'd worked for these past 8 years. Anouk's workshop smelled of fresh fabric and coffee when Thaddeus arrived. The seamstress was bent over her cutting table, carefully marking silk chiffon with chalk. She looked up when he entered, a genuine smile lighting her face. "Right on time. Helen is changing into today's version now. I've started on the actual dress fabric." She gestured to the delicate material. "What do you think of the color? The photo was faded, so I had to make an educated guess." Thaddeus studied the soft blue silk. "It's perfect. My mother always said the dress matched her eyes." "Like yours?" Anouk said, then blushed slightly. "I mean, your eyes are the same color as your mother's in the photo." An awkward silence fell, broken when Helen emerged from the small changing area in a more refined version of the dress. The bodice now featured the beginnings of a beadwork pattern. "The beading will take the most time," Anouk explained, making small adjustments to the fit. "I'm recreating the pattern based on what I could see in the photo, but much of it is guesswork." "It's already far better than I hoped," Thaddeus admitted. As Helen modeled the dress from different angles, Anouk shared stories of her journey to becoming a seamstress. Born to immigrant parents who fled political turmoil in Eastern Europe, she had lost them both by age 16. An elderly neighbor named Zilla had taken her in. "Zilla taught me to sew. First, we mended fishermen's nets to earn money, then simple garment repairs. By 18, I was making wedding dresses for local brides." She smiled at the memory. "Each dress paid for more classes, better materials. I opened this shop 3 years ago." "That couldn't have been easy," Thaddeus said, thinking of the prime real estate in the old quarter. Anouk's expression flickered. "It wasn't, but I found a way." She turned back to Helen. "That's enough for today. Thank you." After Helen left, Anouk made tea on a hot plate in the corner of her workshop. She served it in mismatched cups, sitting across from Thaddeus at her cutting table. "What about you?" she asked. "The papers say plenty about Thaddeus Blackwood, business genius and heir to a shipping fortune, but they don't say much about the man." No one had asked him that in years. Most people thought they already knew everything about him worth knowing. "Not much to tell." He shrugged. "Grew up with enormous privilege, Ivy League education. Took over the company when my father died 10 years ago. Had the accident 5 years ago that put me in this chair. And that's it? The sum total of who you are? According to most people. Anouk shook her head. I don't believe that for a second. Something about her certainty loosened a knot inside him. Over the next hour, Thaddeus found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. His love of old jazz records, his secret passion for astronomy, his dream of sailing again someday despite his disability. Anouk listened without judgment, asking questions that showed she was truly hearing him. When his phone rang, Thaddeus was surprised to see over 2 hours had passed. The call was from his head of security. Sir, we've been trying to reach you. There's an issue at headquarters. Thaddeus looked up at Anouk. I have to go. She nodded. Same time next week? I'll be here. Back at Blackwood headquarters, Thaddeus found chaos. Federal agents filled the main lobby and his cousin Gresham waited by the elevators, his typically sleek appearance disheveled. Where have you been? Gresham demanded. The feds showed up with a warrant 2 hours ago. They're seizing records from our Singapore office. On what grounds? They claim our ships have been transporting illegal goods, weapons, drugs, who knows what else. Gresham ran a hand through his thinning hair. It's absurd, of course. Thaddeus wheeled himself toward the conference room where the lead agent waited. If it's absurd, we have nothing to worry about. 6 hours later, after intense discussions with federal agents and company lawyers, Thaddeus finally headed home. The allegations were serious. Evidence suggested that several Blackwood container ships had been used to smuggle weapons into countries under embargo. The paper trail implicated mid-level managers but raised questions about how such operations could occur without higher approval. We need our own investigation, Thaddeus told his security chief. Independent of the federal one, I want to know exactly what's been happening on my ships. That night, Thaddeus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the timing, these allegations surfacing just as someone had tried to kill him. Was there a connection? And if so, how high did it go in his own company? The next morning, Meredith brought him a small package that had been hand-delivered to the front desk. Inside, Thaddeus found a selection of vintage buttons and a note in elegant handwriting. These might work for your mother's dress. Found them at an estate sale. A. He ran his fingers over the delicate pearl buttons, something warm spreading through his chest. The gesture was thoughtful, unexpected, like Anouk herself. Over the next 2 weeks, a pattern emerged. Thaddeus visited the workshop every Tuesday for fittings, staying longer each time to talk with Anouk. He began bringing her small gifts as well, rare threads from Japan, vintage lace from a dealer in New York, design books he thought she might appreciate. He told himself these were practical contributions to the project, but the way his heart lifted when she smiled told a different story. Meanwhile, the company investigation revealed disturbing information. The illegal shipments had been deliberately concealed using a sophisticated double booking system. Someone with extensive knowledge of Blackwood's operations and high-level access to their systems was involved. The trail leads to the financial department, his investigator reported. But then it goes cold. Records have been altered, Mr. Blackwood, professionally. Gresham oversees all financial operations, Thaddeus said quietly. I'm not accusing your cousin, sir, but whoever is behind this has that level of access. That evening, Thaddeus received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph of him entering Anouk's shop, with a message scrawled across it. Back off, or she's next. Cold fear gripped him. The shooter might be in custody, but the real threat remained. Worse, now Anouk was in danger simply for knowing him. The fourth fitting became tense when Thaddeus arrived with 2 security guards who insisted on sweeping the shop before letting him enter. What's going on? Anouk asked when they finally left them alone. A precaution. Thaddeus didn't want to frighten her with the truth, but Anouk wasn't easily fooled. This isn't about Martin Voss, is it? The paper said they caught the man who shot at you. It's complicated. He sighed. The federal investigation at my company has uncovered something bigger than we thought. There may be people who don't want me digging further. And these people know about me? About your visits here? Thaddeus hesitated, then nodded. I received a threatening photo. You were in it. Fear flashed across her face, quickly replaced by determination. Then we should cancel the remaining fittings. I can finish the dress without them. No, Thaddeus said more forcefully than he intended. I mean, I don't want to disrupt your work. My security team can protect us both. What he couldn't say was how these Tuesday afternoons had become vital to him, a lifeline of normalcy and connection in an increasingly dangerous situation. In Anouk's small workshop for a few hours each week, he wasn't the CEO under federal investigation or the target of unknown enemies. He was just a man, enjoying the company of a woman who saw him clearly. The dress is nearly finished anyway, Anouk said softly. Just one more fitting next week, then final adjustments. As she helped Helen with the now nearly complete dress, Thaddeus noticed how beautiful it had become. The delicate beadwork on the bodice caught the light, creating patterns that seemed to dance as Helen moved. His mother would be stunned by the craftsmanship. You're remarkably talented, he told Anouk when Helen had gone to change. Have you ever considered expanding? Opening a larger atelier, perhaps taking on apprentices? A shadow passed over her face. That was the dream. But dreams require capital. I could help with that. I don't take charity, Mr. Blackwood. Not charity, an investment, business partners. Anouk stared at him. Why would you want to invest in a tiny dress shop? Because I believe in your talent. He hesitated, then added more softly, and because these past few weeks have been the happiest I've had in years. The confession hung in the air between them. Anouk's eyes widened slightly, a blush spreading across her cheeks. She took a step toward him, then stopped as her phone rang. I should get that. It might be Zilla. She turned away, answering the call. Thaddeus watched her expression change. Surprise, then concern, then something that looked like fear before she carefully controlled her features. Yes, I understand. Tomorrow at 9. She hung up, not meeting his eyes. Everything okay? Fine, just a client with an emergency alteration. She busied herself with cleaning up scraps of fabric. You should probably go. It's getting late. And with these threats, something had changed, but Thaddeus couldn't pinpoint what. He reluctantly agreed to leave, arranging the final fitting for the following Tuesday, just 5 days before his mother's birthday celebration. As his driver pulled away from the curb, Thaddeus looked back. Anouk stood in the doorway watching him go, her expression troubled. She raised her hand in their customary wave, but this time it felt like goodbye. The next day, Thaddeus made a decision. He would tell Anouk everything about the investigation, about his growing suspicion that someone inside his company, possibly his own cousin, was involved in illegal activities, and most importantly, about his feelings for her. Without calling ahead, he directed his driver to the old quarter that evening. The side door to Anouk's workshop was slightly ajar, a strip of light spilling onto the alley. As Thaddeus approached, he heard voices inside, Anouk's and a man's, that sent a chill down his spine. You were supposed to get close to him, not fall for him, Gresham's voice hissed. Remember our arrangement. I've done everything you asked, Anouk replied, her voice strained. I've kept him coming back, kept him distracted while I what, Miss Zephyrine? Choose your next words carefully. Thaddeus's wheelchair caught on the uneven threshold as he pushed forward in shock, the metal frame scraping loudly against wood. Inside, the conversation stopped abruptly. Anouk appeared in the doorway, her face pale with shock and shame as she saw Thaddeus. Behind her stood Gresham, a cold smile spreading across his face. Cousin, Gresham said smoothly. What a surprise. I was just discussing a potential investment with Miss Zephyrine here. It seems we both appreciate her talents. Thaddeus, Anouk whispered, tears filling her eyes. I can explain. But Thaddeus felt numb, betrayal freezing his insides. The woman he'd begun to fall for, the only person in years who had seemed to see past his wealth and disability to the man beneath. Had she been working with Gresham all along? Had every moment between them been a calculated distraction? "I believe I deserve an explanation," he said coldly, wheeling himself fully into the workshop to face them both. "From both of you." Silence filled the workshop. Thaddeus stared at Anouk, searching her tear-filled eyes for any sign that he had misunderstood what he'd just heard. But her pale face and trembling hands told him everything. "Perhaps I should leave you two to talk," Gresham said smoothly, reaching for his coat. "You're not going anywhere," Thaddeus snapped, positioning his wheelchair to block the doorway. "Not until I understand what's happening here." Gresham's pleasant mask slipped for a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "It's quite simple, cousin. Miss Zephyrine needed financial assistance. I provided it. In exchange, she kept you occupied during a critical business period." "That's not the whole truth," Anouk said quietly. She turned to Thaddeus, her voice steadying. "Yes, I made a deal with your cousin, but it wasn't what you think." "Don't," Gresham warned. Anouk ignored him. 6 months ago, I was about to lose this shop. The landlord tripled the rent without warning. The same week, Zilla, the woman who raised me, needed emergency surgery. I was drowning in debt with nowhere to turn. She walked to her sewing table and pulled out a folder hidden beneath the cutting mat. Then Mr. Blackwood, Gresham, came to me with an offer. He would clear my debts and pay for Zilla's medical care. In exchange, I would help him with what he called a family matter. "Put that down," Gresham ordered, his pleasant tone completely gone now. "He said you were ill, Thaddeus," Anouk continued, her eyes never leaving his. "Mentally unstable since your accident. That you were making dangerous decisions that would destroy the family company. He needed someone to distract you during a critical restructuring. So the dress, our meetings, it was all a setup?" Thaddeus felt sick. "The dress commission was real. Your assistant really did contact me." Anouk's voice softened. "But Gresham had already approached me weeks earlier. He said to expect your call and to make sure you kept coming back." Gresham lunged suddenly, trying to grab the folder from Anouk's hands. She darted away, moving behind Thaddeus's wheelchair. "What's in the folder, Anouk?" Thaddeus asked. "The real reason I kept meeting with you." She opened it, revealing documents and photographs. "At first, I believed Gresham. The tabloids always painted you as a reckless playboy, and then after your accident, as a bitter recluse. But the man who came to my shop wasn't unstable or cruel. He was thoughtful, kind, nothing like what I'd been told." She handed Thaddeus the folder. "So I started watching Gresham instead, following him after our meetings, taking photos, collecting evidence." Thaddeus flipped through the contents. Photographs of Gresham meeting with unknown men in private locations, copies of financial documents with transactions highlighted, shipping manifests with certain containers marked. "This proves nothing," Gresham said, but sweat had broken out on his forehead. "It proves you've been using Blackwood ships to transport illegal weapons," Anouk countered. "The same evidence the federal investigators found because I anonymously sent them copies 3 days ago." Gresham's face contorted with rage. "You stupid girl. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "I do now." Anouk stood tall despite her fear. "People who would murder innocent workers on those ships to hide their crimes. People who tried to kill your own cousin." Thaddeus looked up sharply. "You were behind the shooting?" "Martin Voss was a convenient scapegoat," Gresham sneered. "A former employee with a grudge. Perfect fall guy." "You're admitting to attempted murder," Thaddeus said, his voice dangerously calm. "What does it matter now?" Gresham pulled a gun from inside his jacket. "Neither of you is leaving this room alive." Everything happened in seconds. Thaddeus lunged from his wheelchair, using his upper body strength to tackle Gresham's legs. The gun fired, the bullet embedding in the ceiling as both men crashed to the floor. Anouk grabbed a heavy pair of fabric shears and brought them down on Gresham's wrist. He screamed, dropping the gun. Thaddeus, still on the floor, grabbed the weapon and pointed it at his cousin. "Don't move," he ordered, breathing heavily from the exertion. The familiar weight of the gun in his hand brought back memories of his military training before he joined the family business. Training Gresham had clearly forgotten about. Anouk rushed to the phone and called 911. "Attempted assault at Yarrow and Thread in the Old Quarter. A man has a gun. Please hurry." While they waited for the police, Anouk helped Thaddeus back into his wheelchair. Gresham lay on the floor, clutching his injured wrist, his earlier confidence replaced by seething hatred. "You'll never prove anything," he spat. "My associates will have erased any trail by morning." "I don't think so," Thaddeus said calmly. "The moment I suspected you might be involved, I had my security team make copies of everything. They've been building a case for weeks." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "Why, Gresham?" Thaddeus asked. "We're family. The company was already successful." "Success?" Gresham laughed bitterly. "You call a 3% profit margin success? While you focused on ethical shipping practices and environmental standards, I found customers willing to pay 10 times our normal rates. Do you know how much warlords pay to transport weapons? How much drug cartels pay for reliable shipping?" The police arrived moments later, taking Gresham into custody and collecting statements from Thaddeus and Anouk. By the time they finally left, it was past midnight. Anouk made fresh tea, her hands still shaking slightly as she poured. "I should have told you sooner," she said, sitting across from Thaddeus at her work table. "About Gresham's original offer, but I was afraid you wouldn't believe me." "When did you start suspecting him?" "After our second meeting. You talked about your father's integrity, about wanting to run the company with the same values. It didn't match what Gresham had told me." She looked down at her teacup. "By then, I was already gathering evidence, and then, Thaddeus prompted gently. "And then, I started to care about you." Her eyes met his, vulnerable and honest. Not Thaddeus Blackwood, the shipping magnate, but the man who loves old jazz records and looks at stars through his telescope. The confession hung in the air between them. "I didn't want to ruin your mother's birthday surprise with all this," she continued quickly. "I planned to give you the evidence after the party." Thaddeus reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You saved my life. Probably more than once. You saved mine too, just now." She squeezed his hand, then suddenly pulled back. "Your shoulder. You're bleeding." In the chaos, neither had noticed that one of Gresham's wild shots had grazed Thaddeus's shoulder. Anouk insisted on treating it, gently cleaning the wound with supplies from her first aid kit. "It's just a scratch," Thaddeus assured her as she worked. "Even scratches need attention." Her fingers were gentle, her face close to his as she applied a bandage. "I almost lost you today." The quiet admission made Thaddeus's heart race. When she finished with the bandage, he caught her hand, keeping her close. "Anouk," he said softly, "when I heard you talking with Gresham, I thought everything between us had been a lie." "Not everything," she whispered. "Not the important parts." He reached up to touch her cheek and she leaned into his hand. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he drew her closer until their lips met in a gentle kiss. The connection felt both new and familiar, as if they'd been moving toward this moment since they first met. When they finally parted, Anouk's eyes shimmered with emotion. "I never expected this when I agreed to make your mother's dress." "Neither did I." Thaddeus smiled. "Speaking of which, is it finished?" "Almost. The final fitting was supposed to be next Tuesday, but after tonight, we need to be careful," Thaddeus agreed. Gresham mentioned associates. He wasn't working alone. His phone rang, Detective Taylor calling for an update. The conversation was brief, but alarming. "Gresham escaped police custody," Thaddeus reported when he hung up. "During transfer to the federal building." Fear flashed across Anouk's face. How is that possible? He had help. Taylor thinks corrupt officers. They're searching for him now, but… He didn't need to finish the thought. Both knew Gresham would come after them. You should go to a safe house, Anouk said. Somewhere he wouldn't know about. I have one, a cabin my father built off the grid. Not even Gresham knows about it. Thaddeus took her hand again. Come with me, just until they find him. I can't leave Zilla alone, and your mother's birthday is in 4 days. The dress needs those final touches. Before Thaddeus could argue, his security team called. They had secured his penthouse and were on their way to escort him home. A protective detail would remain with Anouk as well. This isn't over, he promised her as they waited for his team to arrive. Not the danger, but not us either. Anouk smiled, resting her forehead against his. I didn't think happy endings were for people like me. This isn't an ending yet, Thaddeus said. Just the middle of our story. The next morning, federal agents arrested 3 executives at Blackwood Shipping based on evidence from both their investigation and the materials Anouk had provided. But Gresham remained at large, his resources and connections making him a dangerous fugitive. Thaddeus insisted on moving Zilla to his penthouse for protection, setting her up in a comfortable guest suite with a private nurse. The elderly woman was delighted by the luxury but more impressed by the way her little Anouk had captured the heart of Thaddeus Blackwood. Always knew she was special, Zilla told Thaddeus with a wink. Knew you must be special too, for her to talk about you so much. Security remained tight as Anouk put the finishing touches on Eudora Blackwood's dress. She worked in a makeshift studio Thaddeus had created in his penthouse, with all her necessary supplies brought from her shop. The night before the birthday celebration, as they sat together on his terrace watching the stars, Thaddeus received a disturbing call from his head of security. Sir, there's been a break-in at Miss Zephirine's shop. Everything's destroyed. Anouk, hearing only Thaddeus's side of the conversation, watched his face darken. Gresham? He nodded grimly. Seems like a warning. He knows the dress is important to you. Her hands twisted in her lap. He's telling us he's still out there, still watching. Thaddeus took her hands in his. We could cancel tomorrow's party. No one would blame us under the circumstances. And let him win? Anouk shook her head firmly. Your mother deserves her birthday celebration, and that dress is the most beautiful thing I've ever created. She needs to wear it. Later that night, as Anouk slept in the guest room next to Zilla's, Thaddeus received another call. This time, it was Gresham himself. Enjoying playing house with your little seamstress, cousin? His voice was slurred, possibly from alcohol or pain medication for his injured wrist. What do you want, Gresham? Want? I want what should have been mine. The company, the fortune, the Blackwood legacy. It's over, Thaddeus said firmly. Turn yourself in before this gets worse. Gresham laughed, a cold, brittle sound. Nothing's over until I say it is. Tell your girlfriend to check her old neighbor's room. The line went dead. Heart-pounding, Thaddeus rushed to the guest rooms, throwing open Zilla's door. The bed was empty, the window open to the night air. Impossible in a penthouse 40 floors up unless someone had entered from the terrace. On the pillow lay a note. The lighthouse. Midnight tomorrow. Just the girl. Or the old woman dies. Thaddeus knew exactly which lighthouse. An abandoned structure on former Blackwood property north of the city. When he was a child, his father had taken him there to watch ships returning to harbor. He woke Anouk gently, showing her the note. Her face crumpled in anguish before hardening with determination. I have to go. Absolutely not, Thaddeus countered. It's obviously a trap. Zilla is the only family I have left, Anouk said fiercely. I'm not abandoning her. They argued for hours, neither willing to yield. Anouk insisted she would face Gresham alone to protect both Zilla and Thaddeus. Thaddeus refused to let her walk into danger without backup. We need a plan, he finally said as dawn broke. One that doesn't involve sacrificing yourself. Together, they contacted Detective Taylor. who agreed to position officers near the lighthouse but out of sight. Thaddeus's security team would also be there, hidden in the surrounding woods. Anouk would arrive as requested, wearing a concealed tracking device and microphone. "I still don't like this," Thaddeus said as they finalized the details. "Too many things could go wrong." "Do you have a better idea?" Anouk challenged. In truth, he didn't. But as Anouk left to finish the dress for the evening's celebration, which they agreed must proceed as planned to avoid alerting Gresham, Thaddeus made another call, this one to Dr. Mara, the specialist who had been treating him with an experimental therapy for the past year. "I need to stand tonight," he told the doctor, "just for a few minutes, whatever it takes. Mr. Blackwood, we've discussed this. Your progress has been remarkable, but putting full weight on your legs too soon could cause permanent damage. I understand the risks, but someone I love is in danger." The doctor was silent for a moment. "I'll bring what you need, but I want it on record that I advised against this." "Noted," Thaddeus said, "and thank you." He hung up, staring out at the city below. 5 years in a wheelchair had taught him patience, strategy, and planning for every contingency. Tonight, he would need all those skills and more, because despite what Anouk and the police believed, Thaddeus had no intention of letting her face Gresham alone. In his safe, behind the family portrait in his study, was another reminder of his past. A military-grade sidearm from his brief service years before joining the family business. A weapon Gresham didn't know about, just as he didn't know about the therapy that had slowly been restoring limited feeling and movement to Thaddeus's legs. "Just a few minutes," Thaddeus whispered to himself, gripping the arms of his wheelchair. "That's all I need." That evening, Eudora Blackwood's birthday celebration proceeded as planned at the grand ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel. Despite the crisis unfolding behind the scenes, no one looking at Thaddeus would have guessed anything was wrong. He played the perfect host, greeting guests and ensuring his mother was properly honored. The highlight came when Eudora opened Thaddeus's gift, the dress box containing Anouk's creation. The older woman's usually composed face showed rare emotion as she lifted the delicate blue silk gown. "It looks exactly like," she whispered, unable to finish. "The dress you wore when you met Father," Thaddeus completed for her. "I had it recreated from the photograph in my pocket watch." Eudora touched the intricate beadwork with trembling fingers. "Who could possibly have made this? It's perfect." "Anouk Zephyrin." Thaddeus nodded toward Anouk, who stood quietly at the edge of the crowd in a simple black dress. "She's exceptionally talented." To everyone's surprise, Eudora crossed the room to Anouk, taking both her hands in a rare display of warmth. "Thank you, my dear. You've given me back a precious memory." As planned, Eudora changed into the dress for the evening's final toast. The room fell silent as she entered, the beautiful gown transforming the elegant but stern woman into something closer to the laughing young woman in the photograph. Through it all, Thaddeus watched the clock. 10:30 p.m., then 11 stay. At 11:15, he caught Anouk's eye across the room and gave a slight nod. It was time. They had agreed she would leave first, taking a car to the lighthouse to meet Gresham's midnight deadline. Thaddeus would follow 30 minutes later with backup, giving her time to locate Zilla. What Anouk didn't know was that Thaddeus had already slipped away briefly during the party to receive Dr. Mara's injection, a powerful combination of muscle stimulants and pain blockers that would allow him limited mobility for approximately 1 hour. As Anouk made her excuses and slipped away from the party, Thaddeus approached his mother one last time. "The dress is beautiful on you," he said sincerely. "I'm sorry to leave early, but there's an urgent matter I must attend to." Eudora studied her son's face, seeing something there that made her usual reserve soften. "You've changed recently. There's a light in your eyes I haven't seen since before your accident." "I've met someone special," he admitted. "Someone who sees me, not just the wheelchair or the Blackwood name." His mother nodded, surprising him by leaning down to kiss his cheek. "Then don't keep her waiting. And Thaddeus? Be careful." As he wheeled himself toward the service elevator, Thaddeus wondered if his mother somehow knew more than she let on, but there was no time to consider that now. He had 20 minutes to reach the lighthouse before Anouk confronted Gresham alone, and one chance to save both women who had, in very different ways, brought meaning back into his life. The old lighthouse stood like a sentinel against the night sky, its defunct beacon dark for over 20 years. Waves crashed against the rocky shore below as Anouk parked her borrowed car at the end of the overgrown access road. The clock on the dashboard read 11:52 p.m. She had 8 minutes to find Zilla. With trembling hands, she checked the tracking device hidden in her bracelet, active and transmitting. The police and Thaddeus's security team were positioned in the surrounding woods, waiting for her signal if things went wrong. But Anouk knew Gresham wouldn't make it that easy. The lighthouse door creaked as she pushed it open. "Zilla?" she called, her voice echoing up the spiral staircase that wound to the top. "I'm here, just like you asked, Gresham." A weak voice responded from above. "Anouk? Child? Is that you?" "Zilla!" Anouk started up the stairs, heart pounding, only to freeze at the sound of a gun cocking. "Slowly," Gresham instructed, appearing from the shadows of the landing above. No sudden movements. His normally impeccable appearance was gone, replaced by disheveled clothing and wild eyes. His injured wrist was wrapped in a crude bandage, and he swayed slightly as if drunk or on pain medication. "Where's Zilla?" Anouk demanded. Gresham gestured upward with his gun. "Top floor, tied up but unharmed, for now." Anouk continued climbing, Gresham following close behind. Each step brought her closer to Zilla but also further from any hope of escape or rescue. The tracking device felt heavy on her wrist, a reminder of the help that might come too late. At the top of the lighthouse, in the old keeper's quarters, she found Zilla tied to a chair. The elderly woman's face lit up at the sight of Anouk, then fell as she noticed Gresham with his gun. "You shouldn't have come, child," Zilla said sadly. "Of course I came." Anouk moved toward her, but Gresham grabbed her arm. "Touching reunion," he sneered. "Now let's get down to business." "What do you want, Gresham?" Anouk asked, though she already knew the answer. "First, that tracking device you're wearing. Did you think I wouldn't check?" Anouk's heart sank as she removed the bracelet. Gresham smashed it under his shoe, cutting off her connection to those waiting to help. "Now, the evidence you collected, all of it. Where are the originals?" "In a safe deposit box," she lied, hoping to buy time. The truth was that all her evidence was already with the federal authorities. "And the key?" "Hidden at my shop." Gresham laughed bitterly. "Your shop is in ruins. Try again." "It's with Thaddeus," she admitted, as if reluctantly. "Of course it is. Your knight in a wheeled chariot." He waved the gun toward the window. "Look outside. See any sign of rescue? Your tracking device has been sending signals from a mile away. A simple redirection trick. No one's coming to save you." Anouk's stomach twisted with fear, but she kept her expression neutral. "Then what happens now?" "Now," Gresham said, moving closer. "You're going to call my dear cousin and tell him to bring the evidence here if he wants to see you again. He won't have it with him. Then he'll need to get it, won't he? And come alone." Gresham handed her a phone. With no choice, Anouk dialed Thaddeus's number. When he answered on the first ring, his voice was tense. "Anouk? Where are you? Your signal's coming from the beach." "Thaddeus, I'm at the lighthouse with Gresham. Gresham grabbed the phone. "She's alive, cousin. So is the old woman. Keep it that way by bringing me every piece of evidence you have against me. Come alone, or they both die." He hung up, smiling coldly at Anouk. "And now we wait." Meanwhile, Thaddeus was already much closer than Gresham realized. Having anticipated that the tracking device might be compromised, he had installed a second one in Anouk's coat, a precaution he hadn't told her about to ensure her reactions would be genuine. He sat in his wheelchair at the base of the lighthouse, hidden in shadows as he saw Gresham take the call on the top floor. The injection Dr. Mara had given him was working. He could feel his legs now, really feel them. Not just the phantom sensations that sometimes haunted him, but he needed to time its use perfectly. Detective Taylor approached quietly from the tree line. "Our men are in position," he whispered. "But we have a problem. There's only one entrance and Gresham has a clear view of anyone coming up those stairs. He'll see us before we're halfway up." "I know another way in," Thaddeus said. "A maintenance access from the old boathouse. My father showed me when I was a boy." Taylor looked doubtful. "Even if that's still accessible, you can't—" "I can," Thaddeus interrupted firmly. "I've been in physical therapy for a year. Experimental treatments. I can stand, walk a short distance. Not for long, but enough." The detective studied him for a moment, then nodded. "What do you need?" 10 minutes to get into position, then create a distraction, something to draw his attention to the main entrance. As Taylor retreated to brief his team, Thaddeus wheeled himself toward the boathouse, a small structure connected to the lighthouse by a narrow pathway along the rocks. The route would be treacherous, even for someone with full mobility. For him, it would be a supreme test of will and strength. At the boathouse, Thaddeus found what he was looking for, a rusted door that opened to a narrow maintenance tunnel, designed to allow keepers to access the tower during storms too severe to use the exposed outer path. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the handlebars of his wheelchair and slowly pulled himself upright. Pain shot through his underused legs, but they held. Leaning heavily against the wall, he took one step, then another. Each movement was agony, but also a victory over the limitations that had defined his life for 5 years. The tunnel was barely lit by emergency bulbs that still functioned on the lighthouse's backup generator. Thaddeus moved slowly, using the wall for support. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. He could feel the medication's effectiveness beginning to peak. Soon, it would start to fade. Finally, he reached a maintenance door that opened onto the spiral staircase, just below the keeper's quarters. From above, he could hear Gresham's voice, angry and desperate. "Your precious Thaddeus isn't coming. He's probably called in the feds by now." "Then why are we still here?" Anouk countered. "If he's not coming, what's your plan?" "Plan? My plan was perfect until you ruined everything." Gresham's voice was rising. 5 years I've waited, ever since the accident." "You mean the accident you caused?" Zilla's steady voice surprised both of them. "The girl figured that out weeks ago. Cut the brake lines on his car, didn't you?" Thaddeus froze on the stairs. The accident that put him in the wheelchair, Gresham had caused it? The revelation felt like a physical blow. "Clever old woman," Gresham admitted. "Yes, I arranged his accident. It should have killed him, but he's always been stubborn. Even paralyzed, he wouldn't give up control of the company." Thaddeus had heard enough. He checked his watch, almost time for Taylor's distraction. He braced himself against the wall, conserving his strength for what would come next. Right on cue, a spotlight blazed through the windows from below, and a voice on a megaphone called out, "Gresham Blackwood! This is the police. The building is surrounded. Release your hostages and come out with your hands up." In the momentary confusion, Thaddeus pushed open the maintenance door and stepped into the room, steadying himself against the wall. The sight before him was exactly as he'd feared. Gresham holding a gun, Zilla tied to a chair, and Anouk standing between them, her eyes wide with shock as she saw him. "Thaddeus," she gasped, "you're standing." Gresham whirled around, disbelief crossing his face. "Impossible." "Not impossible," Thaddeus said calmly, though his legs were already beginning to tremble with the effort. "Just improbable, like you thinking you'd get away with this." "Stay back!" Gresham raised his gun, pointing it at Thaddeus. "How did you get up here? I know this lighthouse better than you do, just like I know the company better." Thaddeus took a careful step forward. "It's over, Gresham. The police have all the evidence. Surrender now and you might avoid a life sentence." "Life sentence?" Gresham laughed hysterically. "I'm already serving one, watching you run my birthright into the ground with your ethical business practices and environmental concerns." "Your birthright?" Thaddeus raised an eyebrow. My father chose me to lead the company because he saw what you really are. Greedy, impulsive, without principles. Gresham's face contorted with rage. He was wrong about me, wrong about everything. As Gresham's attention fixed on Thaddeus, Anouk slowly moved toward Zillah, untying her bonds. The older woman's eyes darted between the cousins, alert for any chance to help. "It doesn't have to end this way," Thaddeus said, taking another painful step forward. "Your father would—" "Don't talk about my father," Gresham shouted. "Your father pushed him out, took everything that should have been ours." "That's not true. Uncle Robert left the company by choice. He wanted to paint, to travel. Your father chose his happiness over wealth." "He chose weakness." Gresham's hand shook as he kept the gun pointed at Thaddeus. "Just like you, with your charity foundations and fair wage policies." Thaddeus could feel his strength fading, his legs threatening to give way. He needed to end this now. "You're right about one thing," he said, his voice steady despite the pain. "I did choose something different for the company. But it wasn't weakness, Gresham. It was courage. The courage to build something that matters beyond profit." "Save your speeches," Gresham snarled, backing toward the window that overlooked the rocky shore below. "I'm leaving, and you're going to tell those cops to stand down." "You know I can't do that." "Then I'll take her with me." He lunged suddenly for Anouk, grabbing her arm. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Thaddeus, drawing on his last reserves of strength, launched himself forward. His body collided with Gresham's, breaking his grip on Anouk. The momentum carried both men toward the open window. Gresham, thrown off balance, toppled backward over the sill, dragging Thaddeus with him. At the last instant, Anouk grabbed Thaddeus's hand, her fingers closing around his wrist with surprising strength. Zillah, now free, grabbed Anouk around the waist, anchoring them both. For one terrifying moment, Thaddeus hung suspended, half out the window, Gresham clinging to his legs. He looked up into Anouk's eyes, saw the determination there, the refusal to let go. "I've got you," she said through gritted teeth. "Hold on." Below, Gresham's grip was slipping. "Pull me up," he shouted, panic in his voice. "Thaddeus, please." Despite everything, Thaddeus tried to kick his free leg down for Gresham to grab, but his cousin couldn't reach it. With a final, terrible scream, Gresham fell, disappearing into the darkness. Seconds later, they heard the impact on the rocks below. With Zillah's help, Anouk pulled Thaddeus back through the window. He collapsed to the floor, his legs finally giving out completely. The medication had run its course, leaving him exhausted and in pain. "You stood," Anouk whispered, kneeling beside him, tears in her eyes. "You walked." "Experimental treatment," he explained between heavy breaths. "Been trying for a year, limited results. Can't last long." Police swarmed into the room, led by Detective Taylor. Paramedics followed, checking on Zillah first, then Anouk, and finally helping Thaddeus back into his wheelchair. As they made their way down the spiral staircase, Thaddeus carried by two officers, Anouk kept her hand on his shoulder, unwilling to break contact even for a moment. Outside, emergency vehicles lit up the night with flashing blue and red lights. A team was already making its way down the treacherous path to recover Gresham's body. "I tried to save him," Thaddeus said quietly as they waited to be cleared to leave. "I know you did," Anouk assured him. "That's who you are." 3 months later, the grand ballroom at Blackwood Manor was filled with light and music. The occasion was officially listed as a charity gala for the newly established Zillah Foundation, dedicated to supporting young people from disadvantaged backgrounds pursuing careers in the arts and crafts. But for those closest to Thaddeus and Anouk, it was much more than that. Eudora Blackwood, resplendent in the blue dress Anouk had created for her birthday, moved through the crowd with uncharacteristic warmth, introducing Anouk to old family friends and business associates. "My future daughter-in-law," she would say, with evident pride. "The most talented designer I've ever encountered." In a quiet corner of the ballroom, Thaddeus sat in his wheelchair watching the scene with undisguised happiness. The past months had been challenging, dealing with the aftermath of Gresham's crimes, restructuring the company, and continuing his medical treatments. His progress was slow but steady. He could now stand for short periods and walk a few steps with support. His doctors were cautiously optimistic about further improvement, though they warned he might always need the wheelchair for longer distances. Zilla approached, carrying a plate of hors d'oeuvres. "You should eat something," she instructed, settling into the chair beside him. "Can't have you passing out during your own engagement party." "Yes, ma'am," Thaddeus replied with a smile, taking the plate. In the months since the lighthouse incident, he and Zilla had developed a warm relationship, bonding over their shared love for Anouk and their mutual interest in astronomy. "She's happy," Zilla observed, watching Anouk across the room. "Happier than I've ever seen her." "That makes two of us." Thaddeus fingered the small box in his pocket, the ring he would officially present to Anouk later this evening, though they had already privately agreed to marry. The investigation into Gresham's activities had revealed the full extent of his crimes, not just weapons smuggling and attempted murder, but financial fraud that had nearly bankrupted several Blackwood subsidiaries. Thaddeus had spent weeks working to save those divisions and the jobs they provided. Through it all, Anouk had been his steadfast support, just as he had supported her in establishing her new design school for disadvantaged youth, funded by the Blackwood Foundation. What had begun with a dress commission had evolved into a partnership neither could have imagined. As the orchestra began playing a waltz, Anouk made her way through the crowd toward Thaddeus. She wore a simple but elegant gown of her own design, her curls pinned up with pearl-tipped pins. "May I have this dance?" she asked with a smile. The room fell quiet as Thaddeus reached for the cane leaning against his chair. With deliberate movements, he rose to his feet, standing tall despite the effort it cost him. Anouk stepped into his arms, supporting him as much as he supported her, and together they began a slow, careful waltz. They managed only a few turns before Thaddeus needed to return to his chair, but the moment was magical nonetheless, a promise of what might be possible in the future with patience and perseverance. Later that evening, as the party wound down, they escaped to the terrace. The same stars that had witnessed their first real conversation now looked down on Thaddeus as he, still seated in his wheelchair, presented Anouk with the ring. "Before you answer," he said as she gazed at the simple but elegant diamond, "there's something you should know. The doctors say I may never walk normally again. The wheelchair might always be part of our lives." Anouk knelt before him, taking his face in her hands. "Thaddeus Blackwood, I fell in love with you while you were in this chair. I didn't fall in love with your legs or your ability to stand or walk. I fell in love with your mind, your heart, and your courage." She slipped the ring onto her finger. "Yes, I will marry you. Wheelchair or no wheelchair." As they sealed their engagement with a kiss, Thaddeus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them together. What had begun with a desperate attempt to please his mother had led to finding the love of his life. What had started as a business arrangement for Anouk had become her path to happiness. Life, Thaddeus realized, was a lot like the dress Anouk had created. You might begin with a faded photo and a vague idea, but with skill, patience, and a touch of courage, you could create something beautiful beyond imagining. "What are you thinking?" Anouk asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about how sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead to the best," he replied, pulling her close again. "And how sometimes what we think is our greatest weakness turns out to be our path to strength." Inside the ballroom, Eudora Blackwood watched her son through the terrace doors, a rare smile softening her features. The dress she wore tonight had been meant as a gift to her, a reminder of happier times. But the real gift had been what the dress had brought to Thaddeus, a chance at love, at a full life despite his injuries. Beside her, Zilla nodded as if reading her thoughts. "They're good for each other," the older woman said simply. "Yes," Eudora agreed. "They are." As the two women returned to the party, Thaddeus and Anouk remained on the terrace, planning their future under the stars. The lighthouse that had nearly claimed their lives now shone in the distance, its beacon restored and turning, a navigation point for ships coming home to harbor, and a symbol of the light they had found in each other. The end.